Welcome to The Journey of a Singer with me, your host, Nick Pritchard. This is the podcast where we dive into the fascinating and unique journeys of those individuals within the creative industry. In today's episode, I had the pleasure of chatting with food policy expert Gavin Wren. Gavin talks us through some pro tips and tricks for sustainable ways of eating. He shares his adventure working with National Geographic in Peru, sourcing the world's most expensive chocolate. We discover what it means to be working in the food policy industry and deep dive into ultra-processed foods and how they are dominating your supermarket shop. So sit back and enjoy the journey of a singer with today's marvellous guest, Gavin Wren. Gavin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you very much for coming on.
Oh, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
I've got to give a shout out before we start to my neighbour because he was the one that put me onto you. And he's been watching loads of your videos.
Okay.
And he's quite into it. So he sent me a couple of questions that I'll hopefully ask you today. I've always been really interested in nutrition, but I think I lack a lot of knowledge regarding what nutrition and food is doing to the planet as a whole, as opposed to your body. I think I get too focused in on what is the food doing to me? And it's quite a selfish thing. In some ways, food is quite selfish.
Nutrition as well, this is one of the little things that I have a little bugbear about as well. Nutrition is, I think by its definition, like modern nutrition science is quite reductive as well, because you've got to, we drill down into the effects of individual things, but that kind of individual compounds and nutrients and stuff. So I think that also it kind of, that the practice of looking into nutrition leads us to sort of focus more narrowly rather than opening up more broadly as well.
My dad used to say, he said when he grew up in this country, you could only get a certain number of fruits and veg. They'd never seen an avocado. They'd never seen a mango. And even the fruit that they did have was seasonal. You'd get it in season. And the operations of getting those fruit was very sort of hand to mouth. And the transport system was almost small and local. And it seems like we've just grown into... We have everything and anything we want. Where's it coming from? What's the effects that that's having on the operations of getting it to your table, making it last longer? Is it meant to be in this country? Should it be grown in another country? It seems as though that chain of things has changed so dramatically in the last few decades. That's why I find what you do very fascinating, because I don't know a lot about the food policy in this country, and I don't think many people do. And I think we just trust that the government is giving us the right things and we trust that the companies are following the right business practices. But what's your take on where we're at now compared to where we were?
Well, there's a whole lot of topics in what you've just said. I mean, one of the things that came to mind is obviously it's like we've opened Pandora's box. You can't really go backwards. So we've got this huge availability of food from all around the world, and we can have mangoes and avocados and whatever we want, pretty much whenever we want. And one thing that we can't really do is go backwards from there. We can't say, okay, we're going to stop having avocados because we can't grow them anywhere, even vaguely near to the UK. Probably, I don't know, maybe Southern Europe you can, but we can't just stop selling avocados. So we can't go backwards in that respect. So we have to kind of go forwards. We have to think, okay, we are where we are now. How can we modify, change, progress in sustainable ways that are better for the planet, etc., etc. So sort of when we sort of hark back to sort of food my granny cooked and this kind of thing, it's like that's obviously lovely, but again, it's sort of sentimental. We can't sort of go back to those times. So there's that's one thing. There's a huge power play that exists, and it's quite complicated to unpick. So every situation, every type of food, every type of product, etc., is different, but essentially, we've got a government who are quite scared of doing anything that would change the food that you and I can eat. They don't want to be accused of being nanny state. They don't want to do something that could restrict or change the food that's available, because they generally get bad press. The tabloids go crazy about it, like the pasty tax and things like that. Small things, and obviously there's a general election in 9 months or something like that.
Yeah, so they don't want to be giving themselves that name before the election.
Exactly. So they're kind of scared to really do anything that meaningful, to be honest with you. And then you've got businesses who, I'm quite pro-business. Most businesses are trying to achieve good things. However, at the same time, businesses do respond well to level playing fields. So when, say, a government or someone like that puts in policies or guidelines or restrictions or anything that makes it the same for everyone, because then you've got, so say when it comes to sustainability, if the government actually took some more meaningful action that applied to all businesses in the UK, sure, it might take a bit of time to adjust to the changes, but businesses respond well to a level playing field. Everyone has to do the same thing. That's fine. It's fair. It's even. And we do know from experience that if we allow businesses to just sort of follow voluntary activities, that it's not always the most successful outcome.
That's something that specifically I've actually mentioned a couple of times on this podcast. Things like the wheat industry. What I've said on this podcast is regurgitated information, and I'd love to know if you have any insight into this. So what I've said is the wheat industry in America overproduced wheat, and the science then started to back up that wheat was good for you for breakfast, and they built this industry of having Weetabix for breakfast, backed by scientists who said that it was the best thing for you for breakfast, so that they could sell the surplus of wheat. And actually, maybe the science wasn't exactly there. And what that's done is over time interbred wheat so that now the gluten levels are higher than what we would normally process. And that's why we're seeing people with more gluten intolerances and those kind of things. I'll be honest, I've just regurgitated that from 2 or 3 different opinions that I've heard on maybe other podcasts. And when it comes to things like science-backed policies towards government, and then apparently those papers were funded by these people that were pushing the wheat into cereals. When it comes to policy and science, is there any monetary association between some of these things?
Well, there's an interesting example. So the wheat example, I'm not sure of the exact dynamics there, but in the case of high fructose corn syrup, which we don't get so much of in the UK, and there's a good reason for that. I think we get most of our sugar from sugar beet, but in America, a lot of their sugar is high fructose corn syrup, and that is specifically because of government incentives, and I think around the 80s maybe, that specifically promoted the production of high fructose corn syrup, which is why American Coca-Cola uses high fructose corn syrup as a sweetener, whereas in the UK, our Coca-Cola uses either beet or cane sugar as a sweetener. So that's the difference. Like, there's this thing about on TikTok, you'll see like Mexican Coca-Cola, because Mexico also uses cane sugar. But the point being is that when governments, sort of in that case, take an idea, they're like, okay, we're going to promote a certain type of agriculture, a certain type of production for whatever reason it was. Again, I can't remember the specifics, but they promoted it. It then has a huge knock-on effect on actually what the whole population eats, and that was a financially led decision by the government. That was very specifically about money. Now, I mean, when it comes to sort of the UK and policy and financial interests, what we do know is obviously we do know that a lot of large businesses do meet with the government, and we don't know what they're talking about, and we do know there's lobbying, and we know there's all kinds of pressures that are put on the government to make decisions, whatever those decisions are, good, bad, whatever. There is pressure being put on them, and generally the businesses have greater resources to put pressure on a government because they have generally more money to lobby and to do PR campaigns and this kind of thing, as opposed to, let's say, a PhD researcher at a university who has probably almost no funds. They're probably struggling to pay their rent. So, it's a very different dynamic. A PhD researcher or someone like that who could well be an expert in a certain field of one very specific part of food, that researcher doesn't have the resources to really push their research onto anybody. It's hard to know how much influence industry research, let's say, has. And not all industry research is bad. Some industry research is very good. I believe that Unilever have discovered many things over the years that are sort of quite positive and significant in terms of sort of how we've progressed as society. So, industry research isn't all bad. So it's a very murky kind of place to put.
We have that
down.
Negative bias where when one of these things comes out, it's exposed that maybe the research wasn't done in the best practice. That then bleeds into all the other research, and you automatically think that oh, research is fixed or money backed or whatever, but really we're probably talking about a small proportion. The reality is probably most scientists do their job how they were trained to do their job without the incentives. And it's unfortunate that sometimes we have that misconception of research, which I feel like at the moment on TikTok as well, I'm seeing these things popping up about, oh, this thing that happened 20 years ago actually was backed by this or this or this.
There's a huge balance as well. Like there's in a lot of situations, like we've seen it around aspartame sweetener. The World Health Organization came out and recommended against consuming or using. I can't remember the wording exactly. However, the medical sort of level evidence seems to suggest that it's not actually that bad, or there's some evidence saying it's not the best, but there's also plenty of evidence saying actually it's probably okay as well. So often these things aren't black and white either. They're often like, we think it's fine. There's a little bit of evidence that says it might not be, but there's more evidence that says it is okay. So it's often in the balance, and it's very easy as well. I mean, as consumers, put my consumer hat on. It's like, I want a yes or no answer. Is it safe or not? It's like, it's complicated.
It is complicated, and people spend time. I mean, when I was at Exeter doing sports science, at the time that I was there, it was considered to be one of the best research facilities for sport and exercise sciences. And one of our modules was called, it was something like data analysis, or basically you would analyze papers and determine how good is this paper? Does it represent a 40 to 60-year-old man, or is it representative of a child? Or is it just because it says this, is that necessarily applicable to you at home as the consumer? And the one thing this lecturer said that I'll never forget is, he said he produced this paper on beetroots in terms of a supplementation, and they basically found a negligible effect at the time of increasing aerobic performance. And the media said, oh, would you mind if we had a look at the paper and published a bit on it? And he was like, yeah, it's fine, here's the paper. They published in the headline something like, beetroot supplement increases performance by 50%. And he said, that's not what we determined. The 50% was one person in the study had improved their aerobic performance by 50%.
Yeah.
And he said, as a scientist, I now no longer want to work with the media because it's my name under the paper that they're putting on there.
Or they take something where it's gone from 0.5% to 0.75%, and they're like, it's a 50% increase. It's like, but it's from next to nothing to next to nothing. It's like, and they'll spin it however they can.
And back to your aspartame point, I think the research was showing they did it in rats, and they did it on something like 1,000 times the levels that you would consume as a human. So it's digging deep into wherever it's coming from. But I think so far as food goes, I recently saw that you did a no ultra processed challenge for 30 days, and funnily enough, and this is totally coincidental, but I had done a very similar thing. This is the first week that I'm not doing it. So for the past 6 weeks, not including this one, I had this fitness shoot where I needed to get down to a low body fat percentage.
Okay.
In doing so, I didn't mean to, but I cut out all processed food. So I was eating sweet potato, a bit of veg, and chicken pretty much every day for 6 weeks, like 4 or 5 meals a day.
Did you lose your will to live, or did you?
I lost my will to live. It was terrible. But I for the first couple of weeks I felt great.
Yeah.
The last couple of weeks I felt terrible. But I was also making.
That was in a calorie deficit, I guess.
Yeah. But I was making the food from scratch, so I hadn't done proper meal prep for years, and it made me think a lot about that. And when I saw your no ultra processed thing, I pretty much watched all the videos on that specific one. How was that challenge for you, and what did you learn from doing no ultra processed foods?
That was fascinating because it was an idea. So I'd read Chris Van Tulleken's recent book, Ultra Processed People, and that's all about ultra processed foods, what they are, what the emerging science around them is, sort of, how they proliferate in society and all these kinds of things. And then there was a BBC Panorama program about the same subject. And on there, they'd done this thing where they'd got a pair of twins, because twin studies in science are sort of like really significant because you've got two sort of, I think, genetically more or less identical beings, and you can do a different thing to one and to the other. And the difference is, because their genetics are basically the same, it means that it's the actual action or activity they're undertaking that will determine, in theory, the outcome. So they're good to study, twins, but they'd given one twin a diet of ultra-processed foods and one a diet of no ultra-processed foods and looked at the difference in health markers. And I'd seen that people had done this kind of thing. And I've got to be honest with you, the idea of just eating ultra-processed foods, I didn't really want to do it because I think, oh, okay, I might just feel rubbish if I do that. It just doesn't sound like a fun thing to do. But I thought, well, I can eat just... I can completely avoid ultra-processed foods. So, like, what's it actually like just to say no to all ultra-processed foods and just, live like that? And for me, I work from home. I have quite a bit of time to make my own food. So it wasn't going to be the biggest jump to do that. So I thought, yeah, I'll do this. I can do this. I can document it on social media. We can see how this is. And it started off quite easy, to be honest with you. It's very easy to make breakfast, lunch, dinner at home, especially if you've got time, like I did. But then it all started to fall apart the moment I left my house. Mm-hmm. That was the thing.
Yeah.
It was, I think the first time I failed was I met my girlfriend and we were just walking down Tottenham Court Road and it was lunchtime. I was like, hey, should we grab a bite to eat? And there's a little vegan cafe just along Tottenham Court Road. And I was like, hey, let's just jump in there and grab something. We just ordered what sounded like the most lovely home-cooked food. It was like butternut squash and lentils and chickpeas and all, and you can see the kitchen. It just looks like lovely homemade vegan food. But I hadn't realised until I was eating it that they'd put some chili sauce on top that was like a sriracha-style chili sauce that had come out of a bottle that was an ultra-processed chili sauce. And so I'd eaten that without even thinking about it. And that technically was an ultra-processed food. So I failed within like a week or so, just without even thinking. There were many other occasions like that. Someone, like my niece, offered me a Magnum, like my brother. I was out with my brother. He's like, oh, hey, do you want like a bacon sandwich or something from this like hot dog van? We were out at an event or something. These kind of things where you don't really want to say no because it's a social occasion. So yeah, it made me realise though how prolific the moment you leave your home, the moment you sort of relinquish control over your diet, and the moment you let other people, you outsource your diet to other people, you let other people, whether that's a restaurant or a cafe or a food manufacturer, once you let someone else create the food for you, then you're probably going to end up eating ultra-processed food. And that's not a bad thing as long as your entire diet isn't that. I think that's where the problem comes.
And what's the definition of an ultra-processed food versus a processed food?
So a processed food, well, it's based on the NOVA categorization, which was developed by a Brazilian scientist called Carlos Monteiro. And you got 4 categories. Category 1 and 2 are basically your raw ingredients, your things like meat, fish, potatoes, veg, fruit, etc. All just like whole foods that come as they are. Category 2 are things that have had a tiny bit of processing done. So there'll be like flour, sugar, honey, all those kind of ingredients, oils, I guess. That's category 2. Then category 3 is processed food. And that category is when there's like 2 or 3 ingredients that have been combined to make a food. So for instance, traditional sourdough bread is processed because it's flour, water, salt. Fermented foods would be just processed. Cheese, I think most cheese might just be processed. So a lot of basic foods that you can eat as they are just processed. And then ultra processed, I mean, there's a few ways of describing it. The real definition is quite long, but essentially they're going to contain things that you won't find in the supermarket, that you wouldn't find in your home kitchen, sort of emulsifiers and stabilizers and all these kinds of ingredients. They're generally going to have quite long ingredients lists. But yeah, one of the main things that they say is it will contain an ingredient that you're just simply not going to use at home.
Or you can't read or understand what that ingredient is.
No idea what it is. I did this challenge. It's going to be on YouTube in a week or two, where I was comparing how easy it is to eat potatoes, right? Yeah. I did 2 different types of potatoes. One of them is thinly sliced, roasted in olive oil with salt, and the other is Pringles.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
They're both potatoes, and I balanced them nutritionally. 100 calories of each contain exactly the same amount of protein, fat, carbohydrate, and salt. So exactly balanced. Yeah. And it was just how easy is it to eat each one? Well, and of course, it was really easy to eat lots of Pringles. And then looking at the ingredients, it's like, well, look, I mean, potatoes is the number 1 ingredient, but then, I mean, I think they contain about 3 different types of fat. It's like, and they don't feel greasy, right? Because you pick up Pringles, if you eat them, they feel like powdery almost. Yeah. But when I cooked potato with the same amount of fat, they were swimming in olive oil. Like literally, there was olive oil like rolling around in the bottom of the tray because they use fats. Sorry, I'm just They use things like palm oil and hydrogenated fats that are solid at room temperature. So they basically deconstruct the potatoes into a powder and then use lots of other ingredients to reconstruct it into this shape. And the fats that are solid at room temperature, so they don't appear oily in the same way that olive oil does at room temperature. Yeah. Anyway, it was just like, it was really interesting sort of looking into the ingredients.
Isn't it crazy how we're kind of at this dichotomy of the Pringles taste way nicer and our body is telling us that is the one to go for. But at the same time, it probably is a lot worse for you than just having the potato. But our body doesn't, like, we know that, but our body doesn't seem to know that. It wants to take that palm oil. That's what I've always found really interesting. We gravitate towards those kind of things because it makes sense to me that if something is fattier, our body sees it as a greater energy source and therefore wants to take on more. If it's sugar, it's instant energy, so your body thinks, okay, that's a good source of food. But things like that, the palm oil and the weird ingredients in there that you don't really know, I find that so interesting as to why our bodies think that that's what we should reach for. Even though we know, like, momentarily later we're going to feel worse from it rather than better.
And they're so engineered specifically to deliver that. You know, obviously the flavors, Pringles, I mean, they're definitely like my kryptonite, as in the flavorings are just next level. I don't know how they get it so perfect. But even the shape of a Pringle is the shape so that when you put it on your tongue, it creates maximum contact with the taste receptors on your tongue. So you get the maximum hit of flavor when you put it in your mouth compared to, say, like a normal crisp. They're designed to give us this real sort of hit of flavor. But for some reason, our bodies also find it easy to over-consume them. Maybe that's because they've been deconstructed into these different powders and constituent ingredients then sort of put back together. So maybe there's something to do with fiber and things like that. Or the food matrix, but they've been designed in such a way that our bodies would find it easier to consume sort of 300, 400, 500 calories more of Pringles than of potatoes of the same.
Was the fiber content the same when you did the potatoes
I'm not sure,
and Pringles?
I need to check that actually. I didn't go that,
because that could be something. The fiber makes you feel more full, so therefore you want less of it. Our body has like an inbuilt ratio of fiber to carb to protein, so it knows that, okay, if this amount of carbohydrates coming in, I need to take more to get more of the fiber.
I mean, it goes back to, there's a study by Gavin Wren from 2019, and it's probably one of the best pieces of research we've got about ultra processed foods, because it's still quite an emerging area and we don't really know the mechanisms that cause different things. So we don't really know why we overeat them. We do know we do overeat them. But Gavin Wren did this experiment in 2019 where he got, I think it was 20 or 30 people. It's quite hard to do this kind of experiment, basically, because it involves putting people into a laboratory for a month. And it's quite hard to do that, basically. A lot of ethics questions. So, the Nazis, unfortunately, sort of stopped us from doing more of that. But no.
There's a lot of papers out there that we haven't seen from that period because they had no ethics.
They would do whatever they wanted.
Twins, like you said, go back to twins. Yeah,
it was the Nuremberg trials that put in the modern ethics around research that stopped us from sort of locking human beings into sort of things.
And that was based on the Germans, but there's loads of papers in Russia that we don't even have access to.
Yeah, I mean, wild times for sure.
That'd and Korea probably as well. Probably in North Korea. Who knows what they're experimenting on over there.
Difficult sort of thing to do these days, but obviously it's significant when we can study the effect of food on people by actually having them in a restricted environment. And so what Kevin did was he got a bunch of people for 30 days and he split them in half, and he fed one half of the group a diet that was home cooked food, and he fed the other half a diet that was only ultra-processed food. And the two diets were nutritionally matched. So they'd specifically done the same thing, matched it across all the macronutrients. I think actually he might have matched it in fiber as well.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
I'd have to double check that. So anyway, so did that. 14 days. And it was ad libitum, so they can eat as much as they want. So for 14 days, they just eat breakfast, lunch and dinner. Halfway through, he switched the groups around. So the ones who were eating the whole food diet, the home cooked diet, they started eating the ultra processed diet and vice versa. So by the end of it, he had like 30 days and everyone had eaten each diet for half of the time. And he had their entire intake for the 30 days. And he found on average, each person had consumed 500 calories more per day on the ultra-processed food diet. So it was just simply people just ate more. And it wasn't like they were eating like Twinkies and Pringles. They were the ultra-processed meals were sort of shop-bought lasagnas, like things that we think of as probably healthy processed foods, like whole meals. It wasn't just junk food, basically. It was things that looked reasonable. So that's a really good piece of evidence, because it's a good study that demonstrates that with ultra processed foods, we just eat too many calories for some reason.
That is fascinating, but also kind of makes sense, right? I think intuitively we all sit here and go, yeah, I'd eat more Pringles than I would potatoes, because I think maybe you'd get bored of the potatoes as well. Maybe that's part of it. You're like, oh yeah, I don't want another boiled potato.
You know what happened, right? So when I did the potatoes, this is crazy. So I did the potatoes, I was stopped, right, that's it. So stopped there. I put the leftover potatoes in a container, put them in the fridge. The next day I'd look at them, I'd be like, don't want any more of those. I did too much of that. The Pringles, I ate a load of them. There was some left over again. I put them in a bowl. 2 hours later, I walked through the kitchen and went, oh, I'll have a few of those. I ate more of them like 2 hours later. And I was like, what the fuck am I doing?
That's crazy.
And literally, I'd eaten 1,700 calories worth of Pringles. And then 2 hours later, I wanted more. Explain that.
Well, maybe in years to come they'll be able to, but right now, but I think intuitively we all kind of know that in the back of our head that we would do that. And I certainly had the same experience when I was doing this this meal prep thing, because I'd black and white said no to all of the stuff that you'd normally reach for, and I knew I could only eat certain things. I just intuitively found myself eating a bit less. Do you know Eddie Abu from TikTok? He's doing quite well on that.
The name rings a bell.
Yeah,
what does he do?
He was an ex-bodybuilder.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know.
You know the guy where he's like, this is shit,
controversial.
this is shit. And his whole thing is like, everything is bad for you unless it's handmade. And
he does talk crap a bit though. He's very like the appeal to nature, a lot of his stuff, like eat natural fruit, which is, I mean, generally natural stuff is good for us, but the way he goes about it is, I think sometimes he sort of pretends science doesn't exist as well,
Do you think that's part of like trying to give the shock factor on TikTok? You know how people can get more views by saying things a bit more controversial, or do you think he genuinely has that opinion?
No, I think he genuinely does, because he the way I see it is he's doing the appeal to nature, common sense sort of thing. He's like saying, don't have a protein shake, eat eggs. Eggs are better for you. He often, which is like, well, actually, you know what? I can't argue with that on a common sense level. It's generally better to eat like a whole food diet. So if you're going to get your protein from, say, a protein shake that arguably is an ultra processed food versus a whole food like chicken or eggs or lentils or something, then that sounds perfectly reasonable to say that. But I think often the way he justifies it doesn't stand up to sort of critical analysis. I think that's once you go into the next level. So I don't think he's doing it for shock factor, and I think he believes what he says, because it's definitely, he sees it as he's doing sort of good work helping people. And I think on a basic level, if he gets people to eat more whole foods, well then that's a good thing. But I think his science is a bit shaky.
I saw a graph that I can't remember which video it was, but one of your videos had a graph of and it was like people that eat different types of meat, like the quantity that they had, and the top level of people that ate the most meat, I think, was 100 grams per day.
It was like 100 plus, I think.
Yeah, it was 100 plus, and I looked at that and I thought, good God, so when I did this diet plan, I was having 500 grams of chicken per day.
Wow.
500 grams of sweet potato and veg, and that was basically the diet. So 500 grams of chicken is about 100 grams of protein, roughly. And I was trying to get like 150, 170 grams of protein in. Am I, or was I, eating too much protein, and what is that doing to the planet and the supply chain of how much should people be eating in terms of meat?
So that particular study you're referring to was a recent Oxford University study looking at the environmental impacts of different diets. So meat eaters of different levels, the 100 grams and above, 50 to 100, and I think under 50 grams per day, pescatarian, vegetarian, and vegan diets. And that was a purely environmental study. So it was looking at greenhouse gas emissions related to each one. I think it also considered water use and a couple of other metrics. So when we look at food from a purely environmental perspective, the measures that we have, meat is the most environmentally damaging food that we can consume. As usual, it's a complicated subject. If we look at the efficiency of meat, red meat is the least efficient converter of... So if we take animal feed, basically you take animal feed and you turn it into cow, and then we eat cow. So cows are the least efficient converter of feed, as in you need sort of like 16 sort of kilograms of feed for 1 kilogram of beef. And chicken is like the most efficient. So I think it's 2 or 4 to 1. So it's much like 8 times more efficient. However, this is where it gets complicated, because also cows can eat grass, which humans can't and no one else really can. So if you put a cow in a field to eat grass, then it's not eating soy from South America. It's just eating grass that no one else eats. So then actually, well, that's quite efficient in some respects. Obviously, there's a lot of methane and things like that come out of the cow as well. But then at the same time, the manure from a cow is a really important fertilizer. And the effect they have on the soil health, like the way that they sort of trample the soil and the grass, is really beneficial for soil health. So cows have a place within the environment of food and sort of within our food system. But the problem is, and this is why it gets really complicated, so I'm just going to sort of weave my way through this. Yeah. But the problem is when we look at big meta-analyses, so like when we look at huge studies and we go, right, let's take all of the major foods that are reached. Let's say we take 100 different foods, from meat through to carrots and fish and fruits and whatever, and we'll work out the environmental impact of each of those 100 different foods, and then we can rank them and say this is good and this is bad. What happens is we have to then draw on science around each individual food. So we go and find a study on mangoes over there, and we find some studies on beef from South America and beef from Scotland and beef from Australia, and we draw on all these different other studies and bring them all into one place. And then we go, okay, what metrics do all of these studies have in common? So, okay, they all have greenhouse gas emissions. Great, well, we can compare that. Do they all compare soil health? No, they don't. So, okay, we can't necessarily compare that. So what happens is that any big meta-analysis that compares all different food groups will inevitably miss some metrics relating to certain types of production. So in the case of cows, many of the beneficial qualities of cows often aren't captured in a meta-analysis. So farmers will always, especially British farmers, because British farmers generally say cattle is kept in quite a sustainable way relatively compared to other practices around the world. So British farmers will generally get upset about these big meta-analyses because they've just got cows who are on the side of a hill where you couldn't grow or do much else, and it's a fairly sustainable way to raise livestock compared to, sort of chopping down the Amazon and feeding them on soy. So anyway, that's a very long-winded way of saying that it's kind of complicated, but still, nonetheless, by our current measures, meat still is the heaviest impact on the planet. So 500 grams of chicken's a lot, by the way.
That is. I mean, it's. I will just say that's not my usual. It was for that 6-week period of time. I was trying to preserve as much muscle mass.
The thing is, though, is in general, in a country like the UK, it's good to eat less meat. I mean, that's my line on this. I'm not going to tell anyone to be vegan or to be vegetarian or whatever, but in general, if you're someone who consumes a reasonable amount of meat, it's always worth just looking at alternatives.
Well, my neighbour that put me on to you, they come over for dinner quite a bit, and they actually introduced us to the concept of these things and said, look, we do this red meat once every week or two. We do fish. We have a day of the week where it's vegetarian, a day of the week where it's vegan, and in general, we've just reduced our meat consumption and replace it with other things, which is totally doable. You can make yourself a lovely vegetarian curry or something like that. There are alternatives. You can get your macros in there if you're that way inclined. And it made us start to think a bit more outside the box. I think in this country as well, like it certainly was the case for me. When I went to university, it was like, okay, what do I do? I'm a student. Pasta and chicken or rice and chicken. That was like all you could afford or get in, and you don't think about those things as much. And then as we've gotten older and our household income's gone up, you can be a bit more conscientious about what you're choosing. What would you recommend in terms of red meat, fish, veggie, those kind of things for somebody that is very active and is conscious about their protein intake, and what's a good sustainable practice?
So one of the things that I've been doing a lot recently, because sort of, I find it as challenging as anyone else, we'll get set in our ways around eating and stuff like that, is that I'm trying wherever possible to replace things like rice and pasta with things like lentils and chickpeas. So basically, because lentils and chickpeas, they've got plenty of carbohydrate in them. They've also got more protein in them, say rice and pasta has, I think. I'll have to check that, but I'm pretty sure. So, but subtle changes like that, they increase the amount of protein I'm getting in my diet without increasing the amount of animal-based foods. So it requires experimentation though as well, because, I have to kind of look for recipes. It takes a bit of research and experimentation. So I think that's always a good thing, is just look towards sort of pulses and legumes and things like that more when you're looking for like that sort of more bulky side of food, like when you're thinking of carbohydrates, just look more towards things like that. When it comes to red meat, really, we should ideally be looking to that as a bit of a treat, really, as a bit of a, maybe have a steak now and again or whatever. It really isn't good, because also this is the problem, is that, red meat is cheap for the impacts it has on the planet. So we should really try to avoid looking at red meat, like beef in particular, as being something we eat on a really, really regular basis. Also, I think the evidence shows that from a health perspective, eating too much red meat's not good for you anyway. You think red and processed meats are two things that the World Health Organization recommend against.
That whole world of people that are carnivore.
Oh no.
where every meal is red, or these people that do like a steak a day sort of thing. I understand everybody's body is built differently. Some people have different immune systems that are causing some sort of problem. I don't know the background of the Peterson situation, but there is a whole thing at the moment about the carnivore diet and people feeling great on this, but then their blood work isn't great, and then in the long run it's not great. Maybe what you've done with that carnivore diet is you've eliminated a lot of things. It's an elimination diet, and perhaps there were things within your diet that you're eating which were causing you problems, and the fact that you've gotten rid of them has outweighed the benefit of not having a balanced diet, if that makes sense.
I find it fascinating because there's multiple things in there. One thing is, whenever we make a change in our diet, which we believe is a healthy change, then we generally feel good about it. So
that's a psychological thing.
Yeah, exactly. Anyone who starts a diet or tries a new way of eating, they always feel great for the first week or two. It's just, purely psychological, I think. And then, like you say, the elimination aspect's really interesting as well. If you just eliminate everything and you just eat red meat, then you could be getting rid of something else that's been problematic for you. I also believe, though, that people, when they do eat the carnivore diet, when they go full carnivore, that they talk about mental clarity and all this kind of stuff, and I kind of believe them. I don't doubt that that's their experience. However, I'd love to see their blood work in 10 years' time if they stuck with it, and see like, right, really, where are we now? Have you had, if you had cardiovascular disease, what's going on here, or 20 years' time, what's going on? Because that's what the science points to, is not that you're going to sort of drop dead tomorrow if you just eat red meat all week, but it's that long term it could have a negative impact on your health. And I find it interesting. There's a guy, is it Paul Saladino? Is it Carnivore MD? Who touts himself as like this pure carnivore guy, but he eats like vegetables and fruit and stuff. I don't quite get it. I don't know if he's wrote back on that recently or something.
What is it? There's different. There's paleo. There's
keto and
keto. There's another one which is where you basically can have meat and then berries and a bit of veg or something.
Okay.
Personally, my take on it is, and this is just my opinion, a well-balanced diet with a low amount of ultra-processed foods will take you a long way, regardless of what your individual issues are. And combine that with a bit of exercise per day. That's how you live a healthy life.
It's not complicated. But the other reason why I could never do carnivore diet, or even keto for that matter, is because then I think I'd have to say no to cake if I went to a birthday party. And what kind of life is that?
Well, we've got to think about the social aspect of food. One of the greatest pleasures in my life is going for a meal with my girlfriend and her family. It's such a social thing to do. if you're out at a barbecue and you're having a burger, you're not thinking about the macros at that point, or you're not thinking about the environmental stuff necessarily if you're at a barbecue having a burger, but you are enjoying yourself, having a good time. And there's plenty of things on this planet that we do which have a knock-on effect somewhere down the line. And it's about balance, getting a well-balanced diet, a well-balanced lifestyle. When you start taking things to the extremities, when you're cutting out all sources of carbohydrate, or long term, that can't be good, in my opinion.
Well, the other really interesting thing that Carlos Montero, so the guy who did the NOVA, the ultra processed food classifications, he wrote the National Dietary Guidelines for Brazil in around 2014, and they were kind of groundbreaking at the time because they took a social approach to food. In the UK, our national dietary guidelines are things like eat carbohydrates, eat a little bit of protein.
That classic triangle pyramid we got sold on.
Yeah, well, we have the plate in the UK. In America, they've got the triangle, the pyramid, and in the UK, we've got like the Eat Well plate. Well, it's Eat Well Guide, they call it now, but it used to be the Eat Well plate. That's quite prescriptive. It's not, I don't think that it's that easy to remember what it's telling you. So I don't think it has that much impact. In fact, it's primarily aimed at businesses and larger organizations. However, in Brazil, what Carlos Montero did was he wrote a list of about 8 to 12 guidelines around how to manage your food in your life. And they were things like eat with other people, avoid ultra-processed foods was one of them. Avoid excessive oils. Prioritize home-cooked food. I remember that eating with other people was a really interesting one, that he's kind of thinking about our social health.
Well, also maybe you take longer to have that meal as well. There's something to eating a meal fast compared to slow, isn't there, digestively? And we're meant to eat when we feel relaxed and in good company. You might notice, like, if you're stressed out and you're eating something, then I'll just shut the other door, actually, 2 seconds. To explain to somebody who maybe also hadn't heard the term food policy before, in a summary of sort of 2 to 3 sentences, how would you describe that to somebody?
So food policy is really looking at how we manage food within a society. So food policy could consider, obviously, government policies around agriculture, around nutrition, around retail. So all of the things the government do that limit or change or regulate what food we can buy and how it's moved around within our society. But it also exists within businesses. Businesses will have their own food policies that say they will only source from sustainable producers and things like that. So food policy is effectively the way that food is managed within society, as opposed to the specifics of its nutrition or the details. It's about how we manage it. Yeah,
that makes sense. So when you did that master's, you must have gone deep onto all these topics, and you decided, I want to pursue this, or did you go elsewhere? What was the story after the master's?
So after the master's degree, it's a really interesting situation because there's no such job as, food policy doesn't create a single job. You can go all kinds of directions. There were people on the course who were soil scientists. There were people who worked in fine dining restaurants. There were people who worked in retail. I don't know, there was a neuroscientist or something like that. People from all over, someone from a marketing agency, from all over the place that go in all different directions afterwards. So I came out and I'd been doing my writing and photography beforehand. So I'd been doing a bit of food writing, getting some commissions there as well. And I was like, okay, what can I do with this? So I started doing a bit of writing and editing. So writing policy reports, these kinds of things, doing a little bit of research and editing. Because I'd been self-employed for 10 years by that point anyway, I was sort of just looking for more independent sort of freelance stroke entrepreneur style opportunities. And so I did a bit of freelance work like that. I actually went traveling as well. I took that opportunity and went off for like nearly a year and a half and got a commission via a friend with National Geographic. We did a piece in Ecuador about the world's most expensive chocolate. So I photographed that.
Oh, I saw a video on this on TikTok. A guy orders the world's most expensive chocolate. It comes in like this really crazy box.
Like a wooden carved box.
Yeah. I can't remember how much it was, but it was ridiculous. And then
probably about $300 or something like that. Or $400.
Yeah.
They do different levels. I think the most expensive one might be $300 or $400 for a normal sized bar, basically.
That's mental.
Yeah.
But also kind of cool at the same time.
And the reason it's so expensive, because obviously it sounds like it's just clickbait, but the reason it's so expensive is because they've identified the only genetically pure, this sounds a bit like eugenics, sorry, I know, but we're talking about chocolate trees here. So what they did is the archaeological origins of chocolate making, if that's the right way of phrasing it, come from Ecuador about 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. So they found like some stone pestle and mortar that's got traces of cacao in it. So they're like, okay, this is where people were first processing cacao into chocolate. And that's the oldest recorded traces of chocolate processing in the world, in Ecuador. So what they did was they found out what the sort of the DNA, what chocolate that was, what species of chocolate cacao tree was being used 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. They then tested like 50,000 cacao trees in Ecuador, and they found 7 that were genetically pure from the 4,000 or 5,000 year old ones. And they took those 7, they've created like a nature reserve, and they're growing more of them. So what they're actually doing is protecting the sort of genetic origins of the oldest chocolate trees in the world.
Wow.
So that's what you're not paying for sort of the chocolate, you're paying for the whole environmental nature reserve as well that sort of goes behind it.
That is a very cool piece, and to be able to do that with National Geographic as well.
Yeah, it's a great adventure.
That's like every kind of reporter or anyone's dream to be able to go to some exotic country and do a piece on. Did you get to try it whilst you're out there?
Yeah, we ate tons of the stuff. Yeah, because we had to try it. So I was doing the photography, my friend, she was doing the words, and we went out for tasting experiences. We went to some restaurants, some high-end restaurants where they were using it. We were also placing that chocolate. So in Ecuador, chocolate is like the national food, basically. As a family, you would sit down and you would have, an Ecuadorian family would have chocolate caliente con queso, which is hot chocolate with cheese in it. So you get a mug of hot chocolate and put like a soft white cheese in it. The cheese goes gooey, you dip some bread in. But families, like say a kid would come home from school and the family would have that in the same way we'd have a cup of tea. Wow. So chocolate is part of Ecuador's culture. So we were also eating everything that related to chocolate everywhere. So it was 2 weeks of basically eating chocolate morning, noon, evening. And also because we visited other chocolate makers, and the moment that you mention you're doing something for National Geographic, you know, people will literally give you their firstborn child, and you're not asking for it, but like literally, if they get wind of what you're doing, they'll be like, take this. So we were going to other chocolate producers and they were giving us goodie bags as well. So basically I had 2 weeks, I ate so much chocolate.
That sounds
amazing.
Is that not the dream job?
Yeah,
I can't think of anything better.
Yeah, at the end of it, I spent like about a week in a hammock, just once we'd finished, just eating chocolate for a week. And yeah,
wow.
It's amazing.
And then the Swiss took that and tried to build a formula. They've got to have the chocolate, which is quite bitter, and then the fat and the sugar, and then the combination, judging them. What did they do in Ecuador? Did they add, they must add a bit of fat and a bit of sugar to make the chocolate.
So the high-end chocolate, they take the cacao pods, they're fermented, dried, ground. And so then you've got the cacao paste, which has natural oils in it. And then the expensive chocolate, they'll add cane sugar, I think, into that to sweeten it a little bit. And that's basically it, I think, 2 ingredients.
Oh, wow.
What happens is then cheaper chocolates, like much cheaper chocolate, if you just go and buy, say, basic dark chocolate from a supermarket in the UK, it will probably have a different fat added to it. And that's because cocoa butter, oil, whatever it is quite an expensive oil. So what they do is they separate it all out and then they reconstruct it with a cheaper fat. So expensive chocolate normally has just, I think, 2 ingredients. And
so when we see these, has 5. When we see these 80% or 85%, that's talking about the level of cocoa oil that they've kept in there?
It's the sweetener. So that's why 100% see, I always get confused. So cacao and cocoa.
Yeah,
Sorry, as far as I'm aware, I can't remember the difference. As far as I'm aware, it's basically the same thing, but I'd have to double check that. I think it's just like a language thing. But in South America, they say cacao.
Cacao, yeah.
So it would be 100% chocolate would be pure cacao. It'd be incredibly bitter. 90% just means they've added some sweetener to make it sweeter. They've not added anything else. So I think that just means it's 10% sugar.
Of the fat, or
no, I think
they've
just added.
no?
I think
Okay.
just 10% sugar. Maybe.
Do you know the brand I'm talking about where they have like 75 and then 80? I think it's green and black.
Yeah, green and black.
And then
a lot of them. They have different
They have the different
levels.
number on the top. I've always wondered what the difference is.
Yeah.
But certainly the taste you can take. I'm quite a fan of dark chocolate.
Yeah,
I like that.
Same.
Much prefer it to the milk or the other bits that they add in.
Yeah, big time.
At one point we'd ordered pure cacao chunks, and I was having that as a snack.
Oh, really?
Yeah, very bitter.
Yeah, yeah. You like that?
Yeah, I felt like it hit if I was craving chocolate, I could still have that and feel like I'd had it. Sometimes a bit of drizzle of honey on top, and some raspberries, and the combination of that, it was
That's nice.
It was almost as though you're having this high quality.
Well, you kind of are. You're making your own. If you're just sweetening pure cacao, then yeah. But it's really interesting. So I did a taste test on YouTube. So I bought, I think, 4 different chocolates. So I bought some Toac, but I bought their like entry level one. It's only like 30 quid for a bar or something like that.
Is that the really expensive brand?
Yeah.
The 300 quid.
Yeah, you can buy it in Harrods, but their entry level one I think is 30 quid for a small bar. So it's obviously still massively expensive for a bar of chocolate. But I bought one of those. I went to Selfridges and bought like just a nice artisanal sort of bar, which was about 5-6 quid, something like that. And then green and blacks, and then Tesco own brand 70% dark chocolate. And I did a blind taste test with a bunch of people. Almost overwhelmingly, the most expensive one was the least popular.
Really?
Yeah, and the Tesco was generally the most popular.
Is that because people's taste is accustomed to that kind of thing, or?
I think partly. I think it could be a little bit like when you think of any food, I think that to appreciate a more expensive or a higher quality food, you generally have to learn to appreciate it. So I think there might be a little bit of that in there. But also I think that one of the really important things that goes back to the ultra processed food situation is that the Tesco 70% dark chocolate is made up of, I think, 5 ingredients, including flavorings. It's got flavorings added to it. So that's been engineered to melt in a different way to the expensive one, because the expensive one doesn't melt in the same way. And I think that's because the natural oils in cacao melt at different temperature to the oils that Tesco have used. So the Tesco one, I think, melts more easily in your mouth. They've used flavorings, so they've engineered it just to taste probably a bit more chocolatey as well. So they've sat in a lab and they've made that into a really chocolatey dark chocolate, and everyone loved it.
I saw a video, and I will butcher this, but it was along the lines of there's a chemical that you can add to something which basically fries your taste buds to excite them. It makes them,
really?
So you could put that. The lady said you could put that on dog shit, and you could eat it, and your brain would mistake it for something really exciting.
Wow!
And they add that to foods to make your brain feel like it's really good.
That's crazy.
But what they can do now in a lab is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah.
It really. So people pulled me up on this when I did the podcast with Bryn, because I said that they're adding chemicals. It's basically in a lab and you're adding chemicals. And a few people on TikTok were saying things like, they're not chemicals. It's not chemicals that they're adding to it. I'll be honest, I don't know exactly, but when I think of things like E-numbers or artificial flavorings or things that I don't understand what it is because there are 40 letters in a single word.
Yeah.
In my head, I'm thinking that that's a lab-made chemical that has been extracted from something. Do you know much about that?
Well, I know a little bit, and the reason why we generally avoid saying that, sort of referring to ingredients as just chemicals, is because water was it hydrogen dichloride, not dichloride,
H2O.
H2O, was it dihydrogen? Anyway, but the point being is it's chemicals. It's 2 things from the periodic table. that have come together to make water. So everything is a chemical. That's why it's, we're kind of looking more towards what chemicals have an effect on us in what ways. And it's also sort of the dose as well. So water in a moderate dose is fine, but if you get too much water, you drown and it kills you. So water can be fatal. So it's this sort of kind of whole the dose makes the poison.
Yeah, I think like my basic ignorant assumption is that if it's been created somewhere in a lab, then our bodies aren't used to knowing how to process it properly, and then that causes some kind of issue. But again, like you said, it depends on the dose, and there are so many factors involved with that one. Going back to your journey in the food policy, so you went on this amazing trip to Ecuador with National Geographic, and then what's the time frame now between there and when you started on TikTok and your TikTok journey? Because at the moment, TikTok is popping off for you, and people are loving your content.
Yeah. Well, that's actually an amazing link, because I actually started my TikTok account in Ecuador.
Did you?
Funnily enough. Yeah. That was back in 2019.
So pre-COVID, just before.
Pre-COVID, yeah, 2019. And I posted a few videos. I then, I stayed in Colombia for like 3 months, and I was doing a little bit of freelance work, and I was trying to flesh out an idea I had for a book. And I was doing a few things, and I started making just a few silly videos on TikTok, because I was just trying to get a handle of how the app worked. And they were some of them were food related, and I made this silly video with an egg, and that kind of got 50,000 views, and I was like, oh wow, it's like, I mean, at the time that was kind of like mind-blowing metrics. I was like, it's gone viral. Like, what I wanted to do. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, I found food policy fascinating. I thought this is a really, really interesting topic, and everything about it I thought people should know more about. But I also realized there was no one out there who was really talking about it, and no one, well, let me rephrase that. No one who was really talking about it in a way that was relatable for the wider general public. Lots of people are out there talking about food policy, and I don't want to deny those people their platforms, but there didn't seem to be like a public-facing sort of face of food policy. So I was like, there must be a way to do this so that it's interesting and exciting for people, because I know that the core subject is interesting. Maybe in 2021, again, this kind of on-off relationship, but each time I went back to it, I found a new way to talk about food policy, a new way of presenting information, and getting more and more views. And then, by the end of 2021, I was like, you know what, I just need to stick with this and just do it consistently. So since the end of 2021, I've posted like every week without fail.
And I have to say, I think you summed it up really nicely there, but you've managed to make a topic which probably not many people know too much about, or might find boring or goes over their head. You've managed to turn it into a palatable topic that anybody can look at and find enjoyable and interesting. And the way that you make these challenges, the content that you're putting on TikTok, it's brilliant. Even someone that is into that industry, such as myself and my neighbour, I would think probably know a little bit more than the general public about food and food policy. It was even eye-opening to us as well. So thank you for that. And I really appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yeah, and this is the interesting thing, because I've reflected on it. Now I've reached a point where I'm getting like 5 to 10 million views on TikTok a month, and I've sort of reflected on it, and I'm like, it is by design. It is by trial and error. And so if we rewind to like late 2021, where I had this on-off relationship where I'd post and I'd stop posting, it was all part of like a creative, iterative process of trying something, it doesn't work. Try something else, it does work. Try and do that thing again, it doesn't work the next time around. Like, what the hell's going on here then? So it was a constant iteration. But then it's very interesting because, when I'm talking with other creators, I've basically got my own niche. Like, there's no one else who does what I do. There's obviously lots of, say, nutrition influencers. There's lots of, recipe influencers. There's lots of people who create content around those. But when it comes to food policy, it's like there's no one else doing it. And I think, it's easy to think, like, the reason I say this, I think sometimes it's easy to think, oh, I just got lucky. But then when I look back, I'm like, actually, no, it was a creative process to get there, which I'm linking into the podcast a little bit, but it was that sort of trial and error, just keep trying. And then now I've got so many, I've learned the hard way. I've got so many strategies and techniques to build content that I sort of very much have structure to what I do, which is why I can produce like 5 TikToks a week, without too much trouble, because now I've really sort of developed my creative process and my method to be able to deliver regularly, which I never had at the start, which is why I think probably burnt out all the time.
Right. How long's it been since you did that master's?
Well, I graduated in 2018, so 5 years.
5 years. And the icing on the cake is your TikTok almost, because that's where all the eyes are in terms of your journey to get there. It's probably the TikTok which has given you the most exposure to spread your message and spread your passion and interest. TikTok's probably the most creative app you can be on at the moment.
Yeah, definitely gives you a lot of freedom to try whatever you want. I think it's a really interesting environment like that to experiment. And also, I think I was very much finding my way from graduating from the master's degree. I was always looking to do something a bit creative, but it was always narrowing down to find the thing. And so now, with YouTube as well, trying to expand on that. And, there's other ideas and things like sort of TV show ideas. And but that sort of, that public facing side of the food system is very much where I want to direct my energies over the coming.
And you've got to be the right person for that job, because it could easily be some guy in a lab coat with glasses and and talking about all these like long names and sort of, and people would switch off so quickly. So you have to have that presenter aspect to you. Yeah. Because you are a presenter on TikTok. When you're doing these videos, you are presenting a topic to people. Yeah. You're combining a whole bunch of skills, and I think you have to be that person, that specific person with those specific skills, because even if someone did try to compete with you, they might not have those other skills.
Yeah. And and that's the kind of the luck element, or just finding the right
You've
thing
honed in on what you
you can't necessarily you can't always be that person, but if you hone in and find what person you are, then you find the thing that fits. That's why you've always got to experiment. And, like with the process of getting there, I always get this huge sense of relief when I quit something, because I've been trying to find a career path. So since doing that master's degree, so that was kind of like a complete change of career, really. I've been looking for, what is the career that will work for me? And so I've tried lots of different things along the way. There have been lots of little initiatives. I've started up little side businesses and other ideas and publications and blah, 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 blah. And there's all these other things. But I always feel this great sense of relief when I quit something. So when I said, right, I'm not doing food photography anymore, it didn't entirely make sense. But I knew deep down that I didn't want to be a food photographer for the rest of my life. I knew that was something I didn't really want to wake up and do that every day. So it was quitting for the right reason, so that I had more space, time, energy to focus on other things. Stopping doing something because you know that it's not the direction you want to go in. Yeah. It's one of the most sort of relieving, freeing things to do.
That's so relatable. And I use this analogy. I like to call it leapfrogging. And in order to sort of level up to where you want to go with your career, you have to shut a few doors as well, because it forces you to then look elsewhere. And when I started this journey for me as a performer in this industry, I started right at the bottom as I was busking in London, just on like Covent Garden or under the London Eye. Yeah. And I got to the point where I thought, if I'm going to progress, I can't rely on this as my primary form of income. I need to shut it off to force myself to get to the next thing. Okay. And what you were describing about quitting that certain thing and the relief that it comes with, I think for me, it felt like this, okay, now I can open the door, or I can leapfrog to the next thing. And it frees up that bandwidth in your headspace.
What was the next level from busking?
So when I started busking, I was getting gigs. People would come up to me and say, "Oh, do you have a card? Okay. Can I book you for a wedding? Can I book you for my restaurant?" And so the iteration for me was it was busking, and then I phased into more private gigs and restaurants in London, and I phased out the busking.
But were you scared that you would lose your sort of your lead funnel if you quit the busking.
I was scared of that, and I was scared because that was my primary form of income.
Yeah,
So there was a number of things.
Yeah.
But every stage of this leapfrogging process, I've had that fear, and I've learned to embrace that fear as, okay, it will force you to level up. So I phased more into the restaurants and the private functions, phased out the busking, and then I was only doing the private functions and restaurant gigs. Then I started to that became my lead funnel. So then from those gigs, I started to get a higher client that would come along and go, maybe this guy is good enough to play in the members clubs. So then I started to phase out the restaurant and those kind of things.
Yeah, the low paying or the
phased into the members clubs, and then from the members clubs that became my funnel. So then my business model became high end clientele. So I started to perform for royalty, for celebrity, and then I phased out the members clubs, and I was in this circle of like performing for celebrities basically, and then flying all around the world performing to like the sheikhs in Dubai, and then from those things I had a CV now. So what I did was I scrapped all the busking, all the like those things off the CV, and all I put on there was my high-end clients, my residencies in the Dubai Opera House or theatres across the world, and that becomes the selling point. And then from there, that's what I market towards, and that got me the jobs in the TV and film, and being commissioned by Disney to do songs for them. And
there's a few really interesting things there that I kind of like really relate to. And so the quitting things or the leapfrogging, I found it was a really mental, a headspace thing. So if I'm trying to do 4 things, let's say I'm sort of trying to start a publication, I'm trying to do my freelance work, I'm trying to do social media, and I've got some other initiative, I've got 4 things I'm doing, like, and let's say for me that really that's too much. There might be one of those things where I spend like 1 hour a week on it. Like, so if I logged all my time that I spent at my desk, I might find that I only spent 1 hour a week on that thing. But for some reason, that 1 hour weighs far more heavily on my mental space than the time taken to work on it does. Maybe I'm thinking about it. Maybe I've got stress and anxiety around it. Maybe when I'm going to bed at night, it's kind of like floating around in my head. So I found that quite often quitting something, whether it's just like a small little side thing I'd started, it often just created a lot more mental peace to focus on the other 3 things. So, and often it wasn't that it was overwhelming me or anything like that, but it just gave everything else room to breathe. And then also what happened, which is the last point you touched on there, is for a while my LinkedIn looked like I was doing everything. I would have looked at it and gone like, either this dude's Superman or he's spread too thin, and it's like, and I don't think, so neither of those are going to happen. He's not Superman, so he's probably spread too thin. So, I was like, I started a non-profit with someone, and I was started this publication, a website, which again was a little side project with someone. I was doing my freelance work with a university, and I also had my consultancy, and I was doing social media. So there were probably 5 things I'd put on my LinkedIn. And then if I applied for a role, they'd be like, no, this dude hasn't got any time to do anything. Like, why would we give it to him? And now it's like cutting all those things away. Once I cut everything away, and then I look, and then I'm like, oh, well, now it looks like I know what I'm doing. Because all those 5 things may have been good for my ego, because I'm like, oh, I've got a non-profit or whatever, blah. But in reality, it just made me look like I didn't actually know what I wanted to do. So I think that's
such a good point. I think you've hit the nail on the head there.
And it was true, because I didn't, because I was trying things out. That's what I was doing. The non-profit thing was a great idea. And in fact, my partner in that, she's still doing it. She's pursuing it, and it's definitely her avenue. And it's great that she's doing that still. It just wasn't the right thing for me. But I had to try it to find out, to realize it wasn't the right thing. So
would you say, what's the kind of, if we're talking about these big projects and things that you're going to put on your CV, what do you think is the optimum number? Is it 3? Is it 3 to 5? Is it one thing that you want to specialize in?
I think that you've just got to have one thing that you're really good at. I really think it's as simple as that, because like, okay, so I do social media now, and at the start of this year, I was like, right, I'm going social media this year. That's it. I'm going to slowly move away the other sort of food policy consultancy work and just focus only on social media. And I feel that's been really clarifying. So I can do food policy consultancy work still, but that's very much secondary. So I think it's okay to have other interests and side things. But I think at the end of the day, when people look at your LinkedIn or your CV or whatever, they've got to understand what it is you do primarily. And that's just one thing.
Oh, you've made me really think. I think what I really like about this podcast is every so often someone says something that will probably like impact my life. And what you've just said there is one of those things that I will take away and implement into my life, because I think that's so important. And I think a lot of people listening can take that on board as well. Cutting out, have an assessment of, write down everything you do, look at everything, assess everything, and think, what's really working for me? What is kind of working and I could do without, but it's taking up a lot of headspace? And having the courage to drop those things and focus on the things that are working and getting ahead, and having one overriding thing that people know you for. Because instantly when you think Gavin Wren, you think food policy. And everyone has to have that selling point, don't they?
Yeah, definitely. And you can even, if you're juggling things, because like, for instance, over the last few years, I've had to juggle lots of things through necessity because I need to pay the bills and I need to live. So, if something's paying me some money, I might need to carry on doing it because I need the income while I sort of segue into the next phase. Like you were saying earlier about leapfrogging, it's always I always find it's a slightly messy sort of boundary between the different levels. It's not just like you wake up one day and suddenly you've got a massive contract. And so that's what I've found anyway. But you can play down those things. Like, so for instance, I had a contract that ended in May this year. I was working with a university. I'd worked with them for quite a long time. It had become a relatively small part of my work, but I kept that off of my LinkedIn at the end because it was kind of irrelevant, because it was some work that I did just to help, and it was related to food policy. It was the food research collaboration, which is part of the Centre for Food Policy. So it was related to what I do. But nonetheless, the work I was doing with them, I was doing sort of design, layout work, and it was kind of irrelevant to where I want to be over the coming 12 months.
That's another
So
really good point.
Took it off my LinkedIn.
That's another really, really good point. And to me, hearing that suggests that is transferable across different industries, because the same thing happens in the music industry. Even now, if let's just say somebody says, oh, can you do this gig? And it's not really the one I'd normally do, or it's not quite on brand or whatever, but they're paying the money for it. Then I'll do the gig, but I just won't advertise it on the social media.
Exactly.
I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it looks more focused, because that's the thing, isn't it? It's like the attention economy. It's a bit like making TikToks, is people need to understand things very quickly. And that applies in the case of a TikTok. I've got to let people know why they need to watch another 60 seconds of me talking. But the same applies for CVs and LinkedIn and all those kinds of things. When people, when they see what you do, they've got to sort of know immediately what you're about.
My friend and neighbour put me onto through your TikTok. So clearly whatever you're doing is working. You're reaching a lot of people. But he's sent me a couple of questions that I said to him, look, I'm having Gavin on today. Is there anything you'd like me to ask him specifically? And he said, his name's Austin, and he said, so ultra processed green drinks and what your opinion is on that. Something like AG1, which I think is athletic greens, and clean greens. They're supposed to be healthy, but they're also ultra processed at the same time. So there's a confliction there.
Yeah, there is. They're obviously created for convenience, because I guess things like athletics greens is a way of getting lots of healthy foods in a very convenient drink. This is where the study of ultra processed foods comes across a little bit of a split, because by definition that would be an ultra processed food, because it's made up of these individual compounds that have been sort of their extractions of foods, and they're sort of recreated into this drink. So by definition, yes, it is an ultra processed food. However, one of the arguments against the classification of ultra processed foods is that there are some things that are objectively healthy that are ultra processed foods. For instance, wholemeal bread is probably an ultra processed food. Bran flakes are probably ultra processed foods. And it's kind of hard to say that they're bad for you in any way. It's kind of hard to say that wholemeal bread, we've always thought of wholemeal bread as being a healthy food. And I think that they may fall into that category. So maybe they're obviously nothing like, say, Pringles or whatever. And But where the gap in the science is when we deconstruct a food into these sort of separate compounds and then recreate it, does that have a negative effect on our health or not? So even though it ticks the boxes nutritionally, it's got micro and macronutrients probably that tick all the nutrition boxes, does the way that it's being constructed, does that have a negative impact on how our body receives that food? And that's a question that we can't answer at the moment because we don't have the science to tell us. So time will tell.
And the argument for it being bad for you is what we spoke about earlier, where perhaps your body doesn't know how to process it properly, or perhaps it's about ratios with food.
There's a thing called the food matrix. So if you take a banana, I don't know too much about this subject, so I don't sort of like go out my lane too much. But basically, there's a food matrix, which is the sort of the way a natural food is sort of constituted and built that sort of holds everything together. And the idea is that when you make an ultra processed food, you destroy that food matrix, you get all these individual compounds and you put it back together. And that somehow this absence of the original food matrix potentially has a negative effect.
Is that similar to things like when people say the fiber packets the sugar, and therefore when you consume something like an apple, you get the fiber with it, but if you have the apple juice, it's destroyed that fibrous encasing, and therefore eating 6 apples, automatically you think that's going to fill you up more than 6 blended apples in a drink, for example.
I think it's along those kinds of lines, yeah.
So there could be that potentially later down the line, we might see that breaking down a food matrix and putting it all together into something like athletic greens is bad for you for a reason that we don't yet know.
Yeah, or it's just not as good as just eating the original vegetables. You know, it could be, we just don't receive everything as well.
Based on feeling as well, to me, if you were to drink a Coca-Cola with all the sugar and whatever else is in there, my body, after about an hour, feels worse. But maybe something like athletic greens, it doesn't feel as worse. So for me personally, I do like to do things based on how I'm feeling, not when I'm taking in the food, because that can be misleading. If you're having something with a lot of sugar, your body thinks, oh, this is great. At that moment in time, you feel you're great. But actually, how do you feel 2 hours after the meal or something like that? And something like a green drink or a green smoothie, certainly anecdotally, I could say I feel better than I would had I had a Coca-Cola or something like that.
Well, yeah, if it's the healthier alternative, then that's, if it was athletic greens versus Coca-Cola, then, athletic greens is going to be a good option.
And history tells us that often current day science later down the line is disputed anyway.
Yeah.
So,
I think people get too hung up on trying to do the right thing, right? As in, they're like, oh, I need to go on this like new whole diet. I need to like change this whole thing. I need to stop eating meat completely. People like to sort of seem to go to absolutes and extremes when they feel they need to make a change. And we know from, I think, social science that when people make big, massive changes, they generally don't stick with them. It's like diets. People go, oh, I need to lose some weight. So they go on this extreme diet, and then 6 weeks later they've given up. So I think in all cases, whether it's environmental, financial, health, or whatever, the most sort of powerful thing you can do is actually just like a little change and then stick with it.
Well, Gavin, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, because I've certainly been looking forward to having this conversation.
It's been great fun, yeah.
Where can people find you on social media and online?
So you can find me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. If you just search my name, Gavin Wren, that's Wren, you'll find me on any of those. And watch some of my videos and enjoy them and subscribe.
Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks a lot, Nick.